Joe and Alex, welcome to a fireside chat with Global Upside. As you know, my name is Ragu Bhargava. I'm the CEO. And why don't you introduce yourselves quickly?
Sure. Thanks, Ragu. Thanks for having us. I'm Joe Gilliam, the Chief Financial Officer and Senior Vice President of Corporate Development here at Glaukos. Alex?
Yes, hi. I'm Alex Thurman, the Vice President of Finance and Accounting here at Glaukos.
Well, thank you both, and thank you for being on the chat. Let's dive into a few questions. Tell us about Glaukos and the company's mission.
Sure, I'm happy to, and then Alex, if you want to add anything, you can. So Glaukos was founded back in 1998, so it's been around for quite some time. But as is the case with many emerging healthcare companies, the first I'm doing the math in my head. I think it was 14 years was spent in developing our initial product. So our primary focus is in glaucoma, corneal health, and retinal disease in ophthalmology. Our first product actually was in glaucoma in an area that we coined and termed minimally invasive glaucoma surgery, or MIGS. And the purpose of that was to actually step in the middle of the existing treatment paradigm for glaucoma, whereby patients who were afflicted with this condition would be treated with one medication and then two medications, three medications, sometimes four medications. And eventually, if the disease continued to progress, they would end up with a pretty invasive surgery. The idea of MIGS was to disintermediate that and create a safe alternative in the middle for patients to hopefully prevent them from having to get to that end stage more invasive surgery. And that was really the genesis of Glaukos and the invention that kind of started it all back in 1998 on a cocktail napkin. I don't remember the exact amount, but let's say it was 14 years and $100 million or more later, we got our first product approved, the iStent, in mid 2012. And that began the journey that we've been on for most of the last decade as we commercialized that platform. We've added in additional products, both organically and through acquisition, and really built the company more broadly from I'll call it single product, US-centric company to a multi-product global direct enterprise that we are today.
So we'll get into your global aspects of your business in a minute, but what is it like working at Glaukos, the culture of the company? And especially in these COVID times, it's even more important.
Ragu, let me answer that question for you. So, I mean, it's a great question and one we love to answer. I would say the culture here at the company is one of a large extended family. And that started way back at the beginning with our CEO. He wanted to develop this very tight-knit family-like culture. And along the way, along these 20 plus years that the company's been in existence, he's been very keen to try and maintain that culture. And, to this day, we still have very family-oriented activities such as, a big Halloween party and a big Thanksgiving Day lunch and things of those nature to try and keep everyone feeling like a family and helping one another. And that's been a great culture to work in, to know that if I have questions in other departments or need help, that I can reach out to my colleagues and I'm not going to get stonewalled, or there's not those feelings of silos that some organizations have. It's a very cooperative and collaborative organization. And then I'll just briefly mention the second culture that our CEO has tried to install is one of giving back. He's very keen on giving back to the community and in a sense, giving thanks for the blessings that the company and the success that we've had. And so there's a lot of volunteer and other opportunities to give back to the community.
Yeah, and you guys have had a very good success. So I'm sure the organizations you guys are contributing to are extremely happy with your relationships with them. So, but that is pretty impressive about the culture. And as you know, Global Upside is about 40 years old also, and we also want to maintain that culture of very professional environment, whereas the employees are treated like family. And it has been really hard during COVID because obviously you can't reach out to people, you don't see them ever, but hopefully it's still coming through.
It probably has been, Ragu, the most difficult thing through COVID, right? I mean,
Yeah.
most of us have managed to develop or bring forward technologies that remain connected, but
Yeah.
it is that loss of everyday interaction in the hallways of the company that you miss the most, and the collaborative and family-like relationship that you have.
Yeah.
You can't replace with a video screen. And for us in the field, even commercially, in a similar fashion, our sales force can do a lot via tools
Yeah.
like the one we're on, but that will never replace the relationship they have with the doctors and the office staff of the clients that we have around the world. And so getting them back into those accounts in that dialogue, person to person, is something we look forward to very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So maybe one of you can tell us about the growth over the years that Glaukos has experienced.
Yeah. Well, so, first of all, just from a numbers perspective and setting aside COVID, what I can say is, from a standing start of 0 back in 2012, we've grown annually, well over 40% a year through 2019, where we had almost 230, a little over 237 million of revenue. Along the way, we've diversified that to the point that was in those first several years dominated by U.S. revenues, whereas today the international part of our business is a little north of 20% of our overall franchise. So an important part of our overall growth. I'll tell you the other thing that probably we spend as much time on is just what that means in terms of the day-to-day operations of Glaukos. So we break it down into people, processes, and systems. And when you are a venture-backed startup as a company, you don't come with legacy, any of those things, people, processes, or systems. So the biggest evolution for us has been, if you take each one, from a people perspective, from what was that incubator team of 20, 30, 40 people to now a worldwide employee base of over 750, quickly going towards 1,000. When you think about processes of which you didn't have many, and now you've got the controls and checkpoints and analytics and the tools to try to understand and digest a growing business, both in terms of people and in terms of revenues and complexity. And then the systems, we've made a big step forward, as you know well, in the most recent year, where we've gone from the kind of original, I'll call it tier 1 type or smaller ERP system to now Oracle enterprise wide, have been significant evolution points for us over a great many years that are certainly coming together as we speak now.
It's quite a story to go from back of a napkin to 750 people, and like you said, growing to 1,000. How many countries are you?
It's exciting, Ragu, but we spend more time on that than about anything else, right? And it ties into your prior question. As you grow and the scale and complexity grows, how do you maintain that culture, right? While continuing to innovate, while continuing to generate incremental sales and everything else we expect to do. It's a formidable challenge for any company, and we're no different.
Yeah, and how many countries are you in today, Joe, with your own people?
Yeah, so and you can divide that and look at it a couple different ways. We currently have direct full operations in 17 countries around the world, including the United States. And that spans Asia, primarily in Japan and Australia, Western Europe, and then what we call the Americas, which includes Canada, Brazil, and the rest of Latin America. But we also have other countries where we have what I'll call more of a hybrid model. So we may use a distributor for logistics and all of the things that are relevant to that market, but where we have direct employees that are helping to drive doctor education, training, and that initial launch. Because we find when you're pioneering a new category, you really have to a degree have boots on the ground to help change the thinking and physician behavior around that category. So we've done that in we'll say a dozen or so other countries in addition to the 17 that were fully directed.
So that's quite a footprint, Joe, in about 30 countries or so. Tell me why is that important, the global strategy in one side, and how did you know where to go? Like, why did you pick Japan versus South Korea or any other country?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, in traditional ophthalmology markets, and every market's a little bit different in terms of the international versus U.S. opportunity, especially in healthcare. In ophthalmology, the international opportunity tends to be equal that of the U.S. So if you think the U.S. is $1 billion market, the global market might be two. So number one, financially, there's a huge opportunity outside the U.S. In fact, international markets in vision care have been growing much faster than the U.S. because increasingly in countries they're getting more and more access to preventive and primary vision care that they haven't had in prior generations, and that's driving more and more procedures, therapeutics, and otherwise to help treat the conditions. In our case, glaucoma, retina, and corneal conditions. So for us, it's a combination of our experience in these markets and the opportunity size that we see within them. And that often comes down to a couple of factors: the degree of vision care penetration, right? How many people actually have access to primary care ophthalmology diagnosis, right, and treatment. The amount of spending that countries do, per capita or per procedure. Another way of saying, do they fairly reimburse for products versus not, right, when procedures are being done, and how much capital are they putting towards healthcare generally is another metric that we look at as we evaluate these countries. And then just we'll call it the degree of straightforwardness of doing business in a country. And as we all know, we'll talk about more, I think, there's certain countries that are far more complex to operate in than others. And so as we thought about the prioritization, it was about that market size opportunity and then our ability to really operate within that country's borders and hopefully successfully execute on our vision and our products.
So, Joe, I'm sure a lot of this is management trying to sit down in a boardroom and figure out what makes a lot of sense. But I'm going to turn over to Alex and talk about sort of how did you manage through all of this, and what was important strategically from your perspective during this growth process, going from, if you can say, 1 to 30 countries, correct?
Right. So it's an interesting story, Ragu, because it actually started before I joined the company. So I give a little bit of history, and then it'll kind of tie into where I think this is important. But when the company first went internationally, the first country they went into was Germany, and that was back in 2013. And being a young company, growing company, trying to figure it out, like a lot of probably similar type organizations, they weren't sure kind of what they were doing. And so they went into Germany. They were able to get a legal entity set up. They had to find an independent accounting firm to do the books and records. They found a local banking partner, a local legal partner, etc., and set up the entity and started operations. A year later, they decided to go direct in Japan. And they said, gosh, I guess we got to do this whole process over again. So they did the same thing in Japan, finding a local partner, local accounting, banking, etc. A year or so after that, management came to the finance group and said, we want to go direct in Canada and Australia. And at that point, the controller at that time said, I can't continue this ad hoc approach. And that's when he was introduced to Global Upside. And what Global Upside brought to the company and to the organization was a consistent approach, right? A partner that was local in those countries, that provided a local accounting firm, a local HR partner, legal partner, tax partner, et cetera, and helped to form those legal entities and do the back office bookkeeping, et cetera. And that was the key to really the explosion that happened right after I joined the company, where we went direct, I believe, in, I want to say, another 10 to 13 countries over the course of a year or two. And the only way we did that was with the consistent approach that Global Upside as a partner provided us.
Never could have done it otherwise. Truthfully,
No way.
When you take a step back, some of the intimidating challenges, and Alex talked about them in the company, thankfully learned how difficult it was in the context of trying to do Germany and Japan. I think, I don't remember, Alex, you might, but in Japan, for example, it took us many years to even have our bank accounts opened, right, properly flowing and everything else that was there. That process in terms of local labor laws, local incorporation laws, local tax and regulatory, components, not FDA equivalent, but the actual, corporate regulatory environment, and then the banking side and everything else that goes along with it, is just a challenge. It's enough of a challenge for a company like ours to identify the right salespeople, leadership, commercial, the things that we need to drive our business. We could never have gone into that many countries that quickly and focused both on, I'll call it the blocking and tackling of commercial success and the administrative side. We just didn't have the resources or knowledge to do that on our own, and that's where Global Upside has been just a critical partner for us.
Well, thank you both for that endorsement. But you brought up this issue of opening a bank account in Japan took you quite some time, and actually the environment has gotten worse in many respects because of all this KYC, UBO, or broadly AML requirements, anti-money laundering, and sometimes it just is so hard to open bank accounts. And I have traveled the world to open our own bank accounts as our footprint has grown in over 70 countries now. So, but I can understand that. And banking is for sure a challenge. But Alex, are there other challenges that you were seeing in this expansion process?
Absolutely. Probably other than banking, I mean, which to your point, you better plan on a nice lead time to get those bank accounts set up, given those regulatory requirements. But the other biggest complexity that I'll just throw out is around the HR and benefits, employee rules and regulations, and pension plans, and all of the things that are dealing with human resources is highly complex. And every country has its own unique set of rules and set of things and complexities. And so, when you're a growing company and you don't have the resources on the ground as employees of the company, you have to have a partner that has those resources available to help you. And we couldn't do it without that.
So we've talked about growth. We've talked about complexities in terms of the expansion and stuff. We talked about challenges with ERP systems. Alex, maybe you can provide us some perspective on what countries or where did you find complexity as you started to grow overseas or globally?
Sure. Well, one we've already mentioned, which was Japan, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Japan has its own issues, and Joe's mentioned some of those. And so I don't need to really belabor those more. But the second one that's really been complex for us is Brazil. And Brazil just comes with its own set of regulatory, government, language requirements, import taxes, so many things that are very costly, right? And while it is a huge market, I think it's something that has been, I think, eye-opening for the company as we've watched the complexities that we've had to deal with in that particular country and try to overcome them. And we recognize the potential benefit of that country, and that's why we're there in direct. But it has been highly complex and highly difficult at times, for sure.
Hopefully,
it's one of those. I'll add, Ragu. I just want to say the complexity in both those two countries candidly exceeds even what you've heard going in, right? This is not an uncommon knowledge amongst professionals that doing business in Brazil or Japan for different reasons can be difficult. But I will say it's more difficult than even really we anticipated going in. You navigate it, but the combination of language, especially in Japan, along with unique rules and regulations. And then just the overall administrative burden associated with Brazil really does add a lot of complexity. But to that point, Japan is an enormous market. Brazil has the potential to be an enormous market given where it sits in its population. So you navigate it as best you can.
Yeah, and Brazil is one of the countries that I constantly tell our prospects and clients is one of the most complicated countries. And language is also a barrier there because of Portuguese versus Spanish in the rest of LATAM and things like that. And yes, the administrative burden is just tremendous in terms of the requirements and stuff, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So talking about all these challenges, tell us a little bit about the partners that have helped you along the way and those that were critical to your global expansion or overseas expansion.
Right. I can take that because we deal with it every day. I think that if I were to boil it down, Ragu, there's really 5 categories of partners that are important as you go and expand internationally. I've mentioned HR being a key partner given the human resource complexities in each country. Obviously, the accounting partner needs to be a solid partner so that you can, there's typically different books and records requirements in countries. Some require local statutory books to be kept as opposed to US GAAP books, et cetera. So you've got to have a solid partner that can help you with that. The third partner I'll mention would be a tax partner, since there are local tax requirements and things that we just don't have the expertise in-house to deal with all of these different countries and what their tax rules are. The fourth would be a legal partner, and that makes a lot of sense given legal complexities and local legal laws. And then the last one I'll say, and we've already talked about it, would be a local banking partner, someone that we can rely on for banking, and that becomes a key aspect. So those are the 5 partners that I would say are the most important and the ones that we focus on.
And how did you guys pick, well, to the extent you picked Global Upside, but how did you pick partners to address these 5 needs?
That's a great question. So Global Upside, you have recommended and referred to us many of the partners in those categories. So from the HR, legal, accounting, and tax. The only partner that we've kind of done on our own was Bank of America for banking. We had a relationship with them, and we knew they had a global platform. And so we've tried to incorporate that global platform in all of the countries that we've done through our pre-existing relationship with Bank of America.
I think part of what you navigate in choosing these partners is the combination of capabilities and trust. So for us, the capabilities, you can run your typical process of evaluating what they have, either technology, human resource, et cetera, whatever it is that is relevant in that particular situation. In the case of Bank of America, their ability to transact in local currencies and make all that as seamless as possible for you. But then can you have that trust? So that's where, for example, whether it's Global Upside as a partner or Bank of America or the local network affiliates that you've got, if we were entering into those countries, we wouldn't necessarily have, or we'd be relying upon other third parties to make endorsements of their relationships. Whereas with Global Upside, because we've established a trusting relationship, we can replicate that in all these countries where you guys have, quite frankly, done a lot of that spade work. And you've established, and I'm sure we could have a whole separate call where you tell us about partners that didn't work locally, that you've moved on from. But we get to benefit from that, right? Your experience in these countries and where partners have been good over a prolonged period of time, we get to access those affiliates and partners as a part of our relationship, and that's essential for us.
So now moving a little bit to the current environment, and obviously the topic of the day always is COVID for the last 1 year. So tell us, how has COVID impacted? And we talked a little bit about maintaining the culture, those kind of things, but from a business perspective, how has COVID impacted the Glaukos business?
Yeah, I think I'll answer that 2 ways. One is the direct impact on the business financially and what COVID has meant. So for Glaukos, we never really thought about our products or our procedures as being elective, because at the end of the day, if a patient has either a cataract surgery or glaucoma, or a corneal condition called keratoconus, these are conditions that must be treated, right? The downstream effect of which can be either corneal transplants in the case of keratoconus if left untreated, or blindness to the extent that glaucoma or cataracts are left untreated. So we don't think of our products as being elective. Having said that, you can defer them. So what we experienced during the start of the pandemic, in the lockdown phase, given the global approach to trying to make sure there was enough PPE supply, so gowns and masks and everything else, available for potential triage needs to the extent that the emergency rooms and hospitals required it, they really kept the, I'll call what they say non-elective or the elective procedures locked down. So to put that in context, in April of 2020, our U.S. glaucoma business was at 3% of normal, down 97%, 3% of normal. Internationally, because that's a collection of different countries that were in different places, it was down 75 to 80%. So it was substantial. And we went into, a very quick, I'll call it rebudgeting exercise, where you're trying to understand how much of your expense base is fixed versus variable versus discretionary, and make decisions in those buckets quickly, to preserve the balance sheet. Because you assume that there will be a recovery. You just don't know how long that recovery or what it will look like. And at the end of that rainbow, it's hard to call it a rainbow, you don't know what your balance sheet will look like, right? How much of a dent in it will be when it's all said and done. So we very quickly implemented a series of actions around cost savings while preserving jobs. And we raised a pretty substantial convertible debt offering in June to bolster our balance sheet, not knowing again how long this pandemic may go on. We were lucky that we had a pretty substantial net cash balance. So we were confident, but we didn't really want to take our foot off the pedal in terms of the future growth of our business. And like what we've watched from a macro perspective, really starting in May, we've seen I won't say every single month, but month in and month out, recovery in terms of the dynamics and the trends, such that by the time we got to the fourth quarter, we were getting much closer back to normal in terms of potential procedure volumes. Now, alongside of that, we adapted in many ways that everybody else did, and we've learned a lot of things. And even though we missed the in-person dynamic, it certainly has taught us, like a lot of companies, that we can still operate very efficiently, in some ways even more efficiently, in a remote work environment, using technology tools like what we're on here, and through constant communication, but through video conference instead of in person. So you lose something there, but you also gain some efficiencies. And for some employees, it gains a lot of efficiency, where it's reduced commute times or other things that are distracting, and enables them to do even more. So I think the future, I'll tell you, we're not in a place where I think as a company that we're going to go to the extreme that we've seen in some examples, where they're removing their office spaces and it's going to be a 100% virtual work environment. But we are going to, I think, be in a degree of hybridization, where depending upon the job, the employee, the situation, we'll continue to utilize tools like this to work in an increasingly hybrid world going forward.
So what's next for Glaukos in your 20-some year history, growth? What is next?
Yeah. Ragu, I actually like to say that I think we spent the last 20 years building the race car, and really the next 10 and beyond are about optimizing and racing it, and trying to win as many races as you can, to stick with the analogy. From that first product and being U.S. focused to being now global and across 3 major franchises, and for primary products having 3 major products on the market, we have a pipeline that is second to none in ophthalmology. We've got 10 plus products that we've talked about publicly that are progressing through various stages of R&D, several of which we hope to launch in the next 1, 2, and 3 years. So a big portion of what we've been doing in the last 3 or 4 years has been about, back to my prior analogy, getting as many of the people, processes, and systems in place so that we can now bring all of these products into the marketplace and successfully commercialize them and not be trying to do both at the same time. And so I look forward to in glaucoma alone, the product approvals we have for the next 3 years should increase the size of our market 7-fold. And you add in what we're doing in corneal health, which include extending into therapeutics around dry eye, in retina, where we've got programs that can really just change the whole paradigm of how you treat retinal disease. We think we've got an incredible future in the coming years, and Alex and I's job is just to make sure that administratively we don't screw it up, because there's a lot of incredible stuff coming out of our R&D organization, and I have a lot of confidence in our commercial team's ability to execute. And it's up for us just to make sure that we've got all of the blocking and tackling right going into that.
Well, you guys have done an excellent job. I know we talked about a lot of challenges historically, but I'm sure you're now set up for that race car to do whatever 200 miles an hour and win at every race that you are in. So Joe, Alex, thanks a lot for taking your time out of the busy day and spending some time with me and assisting us record this chat. Hopefully, we'll share the story with the world and, help you grow your business and address challenges you're facing. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ragu, and the entire Global Upside team for having us here today, and even more importantly, just for the partnership over these last several years. We could not have accomplished what we have internationally without your partnership, and without your flexibility and your adjustments along the way with us as we've navigated some of these countries and the unique dynamics for our business in them. Global Upside's been a terrific partner, so thank you.
Thank you, Ragu.
Well, you guys are very welcome. Looking forward to another 20 years of partnership.